And Carnage Forever issue number 1 is actually broken down into a few different stories, with the first one titled Homecoming, written by Philip Kennedy Johnson, art by Edgar Salazar, colors by Rachel Rosenberg, and letters by BC's Joe Sabino, with the second story, Unmade in His Image, written by Ram V, art by Salvador LaRocca, colors by Rain Barreto, and letters by VC's Joe Sabino. And just a quick note that the last story in this book titled Funnies is all written, drawn, colored, everything by Ty Templeton. I just won't be covering it in this video, and I'm leaving that for you to read on your own. And Homecoming starts with a little girl named Elsie drawing on the sidewalk outside of a burned down building called St. Estes. When a concerned man approaches and ascertains she needs help, even noting the burns on her arms from her parents. He tells her of the bad things that happened around St. Estes, offering to take her to a place called Convent House. The girl refuses, and day soon becomes night as a trio of drunk college students come along, and although the woman is nice to Elsie, the guys are total jerks and even kick her chalk away, leaving Elsie crying and alone. Elsie then heads inside, but trips and falls when she comes across the Carnage symbiote, who claims to need a new friend. He then leaps at her when we cut to her walking up the stairs past her parents, Frank and Dee. The next day, Dee hears Elsie talking to someone, and after confronting her, concludes that it's just an imaginary friend. Around this time, Frank then mentions to Dee that the dog Bamf is missing. Another day passes, and the guy from earlier speaks to a police officer about making sure the girl is okay, when he learns that 3 grad students were killed a few nights ago, which only grows his concern. Another day passes, and it's now Thursday night, with Frank trying to board up drafting windows when he discovers the carcass of their dog. Immediately, Elsie enters and scares Frank. She then confesses to killing the dog, and Frank tries to attack her, but is struck, leaving Elsie to tell him that they can't hurt her anymore. Dee then heads in to see Carnage devouring Frank. Horrified, she tries to run, but trips and is now at the mercy of Carnage, which we only hear her screams. The next day, the man once again finds Elsie drawing on the sidewalk, but this time she mentions him by name, Jerry, and talks about him being in St. Estes when it burned down and how he left someone to die after failing to remove a joist from their leg. This sends Jerry running in guilt as we see the picture she drew was of her, Carnage, and what I can only assume are the dead. The second story, Unmade in His Image, starts at a prison when we get a look at an inmate in a special cell. He is Morris Bench, aka Hydro Man. During the sequence, a guard grabs a chair and sets off the sprinklers, saying that if he did it, he would let him live. As the water pours down, Carnage does as well and kills all of the other guards, only allowing the one to leave. Morris sees Carnage and ascertains that he's looking for a new host, in which case he agrees. Carnage then gets the door open, but reveals he's not actually looking to bond with Morris, but to steal his power as he uses his tendrils to tear at the helpless Hydro Man. Riot guards then enter the area with Carnage ready to deliver the promise of his name. So when it comes to these two stories, I guess all I can say is I really enjoyed the book. For me personally, I think the first story, which seems to be the more prominent of the two stories, is actually my favorite, because we get to see both the horror that Carnage can bring upon people, as well as the corruption of this little girl. I also like how the story takes place over the course of a week, as I think it really helps build up the tension for when we get to the more horrific elements towards the end, and of which I think is pretty effective in helping define the tragedy of Elsie. I also really like how the story kind of ended in a similar way to how it began, except this time we have like the full change of Elsie. And I think it helps really draw a comparison from when she started off as an innocent child to the next vessel of Carnage. Also, I kind of do wonder how superheroes would deal with this in the Marvel Universe. Like, if you have an innocent child who's also going around killing people, you know, I mean, it's a bit different than when Cletus Kasady was alive and had Carnage attached to him, just because it's easier to punch a serial killer than it is a little kid. Also really like the art in this story. I think that the visuals help give this sort of horror film sort of tone to it, as, you know, the story just progressively gets more insane as it goes along. And since I like horror, I like gore, and this story, especially towards the end, has a decent amount of gore. From the reveal of the dog's corpse to seeing Frank getting twisted up like an Annie Ann cinnamon pretzel with icing. It's actually almost too bad that we didn't get to see exactly exactly what Carnage did to those college kids as well as Lisa's mom. But then again, knowing just how horrific Carnage can be as a character, it does leave a lot to the imagination to really think about these things, and I will say, in my mind, I've constructed some pretty horrible stuff. Also, Carnage immune to fire? What? I mean, the recap does note that Carnage has been sort of reconstructed as he's been, like, combined with part of Null's, like, symbiote dragon as well as some Iron Man tech. So now we have a Carnage with less vulnerability, which makes him twice as deadly. Oh, and then, of course, the dog's name was Bamf. I don't know if this was specifically a Nightcrawler Easter egg, but I mean, whenever he disappears, he goes bam. Now when it comes to the next story, Unmade in His Image, I thought that it was pretty decent, and as confirmed from the last page in this story, this is the base story essentially that the new Carnage series is going to spin off of. It almost kind of looks like the overall idea of that book is going to be Carnage going around and maybe stealing powers from people. And the story had nice flow and progression, although I didn't think it was as strong as the first story. It is functional. There, once again, I think is really good, albeit it's less gory than the previous story, but, you know, the angles as well as the colors, they'll make it pretty to look at. Especially like the final shot with Carnage standing there with Hydra Man behind him, you know, basically ripped apart. Even though he's made of water, he can still feel pain. So in the end, I think both stories are well done, with the first being my favorite, but the second does do enough interesting stuff with its setup and whatnot to make me want to check out Carnage #1. And with that, I'm going to score Carnage Forever issue #1 an 8.5 out of 10. So Carnage Forever issue #1. What did you think about this book? If you've read it, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Please leave your comments in the comment section below. And if you liked this video, I'd love it if you'd smash that like button, share it with some friends, subscribe if you're not subscribed already, and ring that notification bell for more comic book content. And if you're wondering what to watch next, consider one of these 2 videos. Alright, take care, have a great day, and as always, stay geeky.